Good morning, dear POLIS members and dear POLIS friends, and welcome to the POLIS 2020 conference. My God, what a year this has been, and how we miss meeting you all. We won't see this, nor will we do that. And sadly, this is not where we are right now. Indeed, in a parallel COVID-free universe, we now would have been in the beautiful Arnhem-Nijmegen city region. And even though we're not there, they are very much with us today. We are delighted that Arnhem-Nijmegen and Gelderland stayed on board as a virtual co-host of this very first Digital POLIS conference. They will be showcasing their innovations in urban mobility make sure to also go to the Meet the Dutch sessions where they will be talking about all the wonderful things they are doing. With networking being at the core of our activities, we kind of had to reinvent ourselves over the past months. And while we have to limit ourselves to giving you virtual hugs this time, instead of happy reunions and warm embraces at the conference registration desk or in the exhibition area, and to dancing on our own in our respective living rooms instead of on the POLIS dance floor, we have also learned that this digital life is bringing us new opportunities. We reach even more people in our member cities and regions who never had the privilege to travel to our meetings and events, but are equally interested and gladly joined the online offering that we developed over the past months. And we're therefore happy that you are also joining us in the next 4 days. The past months also showed us how important, more than ever, networking and exchange is. Because we had no recipe for this disaster, our cities and regions had no roadmap to turn to for this unprecedented situation. What they could do, however, was turn to each other, listen, watch, and learn. And we are delighted to also see this reflected in the number of new members that we welcomed throughout the past year. We welcomed Stockholm, we welcomed Hessen, Vienna, Bruges, the SBB Swiss Railways, IFPEN, the Molde University, Breda University, and Sintef. And we have 3 additional members lined up to join us in 2021 with Tilburg, Ravenna, and Cluj-Napoca. And our cities and regions really stepped into the front lines. This health crisis is being tackled in our hospitals, of course, but also very much on our streets and plazas, in our trains, trams, and buses. And surely you will hear more about that during this conference. But more importantly, we will also discuss how we should avoid going from lockdown to gridlock, and how we have a unique window of opportunity in front of us to transform transportation for the better. And how, unfortunately, also, all of the other crises we have been trying to tackle, which are maybe less tangible, but no less threatening, they haven't gone anywhere either. So we need to, and we will bounce back, while not compromising on the ambitious targets we have set ourselves in making urban mobility greener, cleaner, and more sustainable. Now we have a rich 4-day program for you, a tasty menu to choose from now that many restaurants across our respective countries are closed for business. Safety, active travel, automation, mobility as a service, data, micromobility, traffic management, access regulations, urban freight, clean vehicles, co-creation, SUMPs, public-private partnerships, you name it, and we will talk about it. Talking about tasty menus, don't forget to check out our brand new issue of Thinking Cities magazine to read about the latest innovations in our cities and regions. Onwards and upwards, it's called, and that's the spirit we have for the next 4 days as well. You can pick up your digital copy of Thinking Cities at the Conference Expo in the POLIS booth. Now, finally, a huge thank you to our conference sponsors, Uber, DPD, and DOT. Thank you for recognizing the value of our conference, and thank you for investing in partnerships with cities and regions. I encourage all participants to go and visit our sponsors in the Conference Expo as well, and check out the sessions they will be organizing throughout the next days. So I think we're good to go now, and it is my honor and pleasure to now give the floor to our POLIS president, Mr. Toni Orsulic, Vice Mayor for Transport at the City of Gothenburg. Toni, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Karen. I would like to start with a warm welcome to everybody to this 2020 annual POLIS conference, and a special thanks to Arnhem-Nijmegen region for hosting this conference, different as it is. It's very regrettable that we are not able to meet in person for this conference, but I'm sure it will be inspiring and a fruitful event regardless. As Mayor of Transport in the City of Gothenburg, and the proud president of POLIS, the POLIS network. I would like to congratulate POLIS on the outstanding work and achievements during the past year and show our thanks and gratitude on behalf of all the POLIS members. It's been truly inspiring, and I'm looking forward to the continuing on into 2021 as president of the network. This year, 2020, has been a very different year for all of us with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I would like to reflect a little bit on the changes that this has brought to our cities. We have seen many challenges in our cities, our citizens' travels behaviors, not just all the virtual meetings and conference, but also the changes in our day-to-day commuting habits. We have introduced measures temporary to cope with the pandemic, and perhaps some of the measures will stay on once the crisis is over. We have struggled and seen unprecedented stress on our public transport systems, and the struggle has led to changes. Cities and regions need long-term support to recover, and we hope the recovery will come quickly. We have witnessed a shift in our shopping and consumer behaviors, resulting in an explosion of e-commerce. This year, especially for Christmas shopping, it's been forecasted that e-commerce will overtake traditional shopping for the very first time ever. But we also had the opportunity to learn from what we experienced in this crisis, so we can come out stronger, more flexible, and more sustainable than we were before. In the city of Gothenburg, all city administration and companies have joined hands to change the transport system to make it more electrified. We increased the amount of private car chargers. We have opened the first public chargers for heavy transport vehicles, and next week, 1/3 of the city bus fleet will be electric. This is one of the largest outrolls in Europe. We strongly believe that this will lead to better working conditions for the drivers, smoother travels for the passengers, and healthier cities environment for the inhabitants. One thing that is very clear is how important it is to show political leadership in tough times and during significant changes. As I mentioned earlier regarding the electric buses, it is important to make decisions and introduce measures that is good for the people in the cities, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. And now more than ever, it is out of the most important for cities, regions, and for the European Commission to work together in collaboration for the common goals. Livable cities that have a good mobility, that are greener and safer. And this is what I think we all want, to make our cities and regions better for the people living in them. And that is why the POLIS network is for. So we can see what we can learn from each other and share each other's experience, good or bad, to exchange knowledge and have access to research and innovation. Collaboration is the key. Collaboration between cities, industries, research, public authorities, and other stakeholders and actors. We must spread and implement knowledge and new innovation as fast as we possibly can. That is why the POLIS network is important. And with that said, once again, welcome to this 2020 annual POLIS conference, and I hope you all will find something interesting to bring home to your regions and your cities when these days are over. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for your very nice welcome words. And indeed, cooperation is really at the heart of our network and is key in tackling all the challenges that we have in front of us in the transport sector. Now let's pay a visit to our host region, Arnhem-Nijmegen, where the mayor of Arnhem, Mr. Ahmed Marcouch, is ready to show us around. Over to Arnhem-Nijmegen.
Welkom in de regio Arnhem-Nijmegen. Ik ben voorzitter van deze prachtige groene metropoolregio en burgemeester van Arnhem. Mijn naam is Ahmed Marcouch. Graag had ik u persoonlijk begroet, u de hand gegeven en u in de ogen gekeken. Helaas kan dat niet, want we houden afstand voor elkaars gezondheid. Dit jaar is de POLIS-conferentie daarom volledig digitaal. Ondanks de afstand laat ik u graag van dichtbij zien hoe duurzame mobiliteit in ons DNA zit. Dat begint op deze plek. U ziet het mooiste station van Nederland. De gastvrije entree voor onze oosterburen. Duurzaam vervoer komt hier samen. De trein, de trolleybus en de fiets. Voor de realisatie van deze plek waren lef, volharding en samenwerking nodig. En dat is ook nodig voor de grote stap die wij nu met elkaar moeten zetten. Dat geldt voor Europa en zeker ook voor onze regio. Want onze regio staat als cruciale schakel tussen Oost en West onder hoogspanning. Naast uitdagingen als CO2 en luchtkwaliteit willen we niet dat de groei naar duurzame mobiliteit stokt. Als goede buren en hele belangrijke handelspartners is een goede infrastructuur met snellere internationale verbindingen dan ook doorslaggevend. Maar we hebben nog een weg te gaan. Het kan alleen met forse investeringen. Zo willen wij met steun van Nederland en Duitsland een goede IC-verbinding naar Berlijn. Want die kans die ligt voor het grijpen. Alleen dan verleiden we onze inwoners uit de auto en het vliegtuig te stappen. Kijk om u heen. Hoe blijven we ons geld verdienen? Zorgen wij ervoor dat we overal naartoe kunnen? Maar behouden we ook al dit moois? Hier in de regio wonen we letterlijk in het groen. Deze bossen en parken geven niet alleen ruimte, ze zijn onze groene longen. En juist duurzame mobiliteit laat ons ademen. Het houdt ons vitaal. Dat is niet alleen ons credo voor het spoor. De trolleybus, die zijn 70ste verjaardag viert, ontwikkelt zich door naar elektrisch 2.0. En de eerste bus op waterstof is al een feit. Maar ook het vervoer over water moet mee. Binnenvaart schept economische kansen, maar zorgt ook voor aanzienlijke luchtkwaliteitsproblemen. Hier in Arnhem, maar ook vanuit de binnenhaven van Nijmegen, werken we daarom met bedrijven aan schone en elektrische scheepvaart. Onze waterwegen zijn van ons allemaal. Als we schone scheepvaart willen, dan kan dat alleen door samen oplossingen te vinden. Samen met de Europese Unie. Ik ben met u onderweg naar Industriepark Kleefse Waard om u iets bijzonders te laten zien. Niet zomaar een bedrijventerrein, maar een smeltkroes van ondernemers die onze toekomst maakt. Dat doe ik op de fiets. En dat is niet voor niks. Als fietsland nemen we het voortouw, zo ook in onze regio. Maar je stapt pas op de fiets als de infrastructuur goed is. Door e-hubs en snelfietsroutes zien we een gedragsverandering en meer mensen laten de auto staan. Het kan. Ik vertelde u over de ondernemende smeltkroes. Wanneer je hier aankomt, dan voel je de energie. Of het nu gaat dan om laadpalen voor auto's, waterstof of de nieuwe batterij- en opslagtechniek. Heel veel duurzame innovaties worden hier in onze regio geboren. Dit moois hier en op al die andere plekken in Europa kan alleen verder uitbloeien als we meters blijven maken. Alleen dan hebben we de bedrijven, de banen en de antwoorden voor de toekomst. Beste lidstaten, beste Europese Commissie, richt uw fondsen en het coronaherstelfonds daarop in. Want naast samenwerken maakt investeren het verschil. Dat is het vliegwiel voor duurzame mobiliteit. Ik heb u een klein stukje laten zien van onze grote ambitie. De komende dagen gaat u nog veel meer zien. Bent u speciaal geïnteresseerd in meer praktijkvoorbeelden? Kom dan naar de Meet the Dutch. Ook komen er allerlei innovaties uit andere Europese regio's en steden voorbij. Daarom zijn we zo blij om de POLIS-conferentie mede te organiseren. Dear POLIS friends, on behalf of the Arnhem-Nijmegen region and the province of Gelderland, a very warm welcome live from our region. A special warm welcome to all the members of POLIS and to Orcelich President and to Karen van Kluizen, thank you to all those present through their screens, including those from our own region and province, like Mayor Bruls from Nijmegen. I think it is a top achievement that despite these difficult times, POLIS succeeded in organizing such a great conference. And that, as European friends, we can still come together in this Corona period. I'm proud of that. We have no time to waste. So be inspired, inspire each other, and face the challenges together. Because when we come together, something special happens. So, let's go.
Thank you, Mayor Marcouch, for your warm welcome. And we really cannot wait to come over to your beautiful city region again in real life and watch all the innovations that you have just shown us. I'm excited now to announce our keynote speaker, Maarten Tjallingii. And Maarten is a Dutch former professional cyclist who grew up in Mozambique and realized his dream in 2011 with a podium place in the legendary cycling classic Paris-Roubaix. Following his 19-year cycling career, he became more active on television and radio as an analyst, and he's now also coaching people for personal growth and better performance. Recently, Maarten also became the bicycle mayor of the Arnhem-Nijmegen city region, and he's inspiring young and old to move more, making the connection between mental and physical movement. Maarten, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karen. I am very happy to be here, and I thank you also for having me here. Let me just start my presentation. I hope you all can see what I'm presenting. I can do that too. I am probably the perfect speaker for this keynote. I used to have the greenest job on the planet. Probably the greenest job on the planet. I rode my bike the whole day and all over the place. Here in the area, Arnhem-Nijmegen is perfect to ride from the Postbank in here close to Reden and Arnhem to the Holleweg in Nijmegen, which is a perfect spot. If you come by here, give me a ring or just look at my Strava, and you will be inspired for nice routes to ride. But from the Tour de France to the Giro d'Italia, and from Australia, Tour Down Under, to the Tour of California. Together with my wife Petra, we love to teach our kids also to ride, and they love it. My daughter just entered the local cycling club here in Arnhem, and I hope, for me, I hope she will join me in my footsteps, and also my wife, of course. She was she's an ex-cyclist too, and as a bicycle mayor, I also like to help people get on the bikes and move on the bikes, because cycling is, for me, the easiest way to get to your job or to the train and use public transport afterwards. And of course, as a cyclist, I was not the one who won all the races. I was the one who contributed. I looked for the little spots and the little ways to help the team. And we heard Ahmed say that we have to do this together. I was the person who loved to do the work which is necessary at the moment. This is a picture taken in the Tour Down Under, where it was 43 degrees Celsius. And with the winner in your team, you need to look for how can you divide what is there to do at the right moment. This was the most crucial job for the team at that moment, because if you take in account that if you lose 1% of moisture, you lose 10% of power. You can of course think that one bottle for 500 grams is extra energy for the rest of the race. And how cool is it to see that when you contribute something like that and you win the race with Tom Jelte Slachter at that moment, that you contribute to what's happening at that time and you have a winner in the team. But sadly, of course, only part of this story is true. We didn't ride our bikes to France or to Italy. and let alone to Australia. The frequent flyer pass in my wallet, and of course also the, as you can see here, the cars which are riding behind the riders in a racing is still, well, let's say there's room for improvement. I was in the Tour de France this year, driving a car along, and I was really happy to see that we had already partially electric cars, which were replaced for the diesels which we had last year. So that was already a big improvement. But I still realize that there's a lot to be done. The thing is, if you have a look at sustainability, of course, because I have no idea about sustainability in the planet, or maybe just a little bit, because I was taught by my parents. My father is a biologist, and really, we had in the toilets, you know, the flush bins in the toilet, we had milk cartons and milk bottles in the flush compartment to save water. We had our the thermometer of our house was always at 19 degrees. Well, always looking for a jacket to get in. But I always also say, okay, what can we contribute as a person? What is sustainability for me as an athlete, for example? I always ask my coaches, my clients, what would a top athlete do? If you ask it to Elis Lichtley, Pieter van der Hogeband, Cristiano Ronaldo, Roger Federer, guys who have a sustainable career, as in high performance, what can we learn of them? The most important thing, which I learned from my cycling career, is that the tool which I have is my body. Not only the tool of the vehicle, of course. And what can I do to keep my body fit and healthy? Because that's the way to realize my dream goals. If you ask, and that's also the work which I do at the moment, it's all about sustainability. So also that. And maybe there's a translation for you guys to make today that we can learn from an athlete that, okay, there's 4 pillars which you need to use to stay fit and healthy, of course. And this is also in vitality work, as you have people working for you maybe, or you are an employee in a company and you really want to contribute to what you're doing. There's 4 pillars. There's, of course, the movement that matters. There's food. You need the right fuel. And that's also, of course, for the right fuel. Let me just finish off this sentence. There's the right sleep. And, of course, there's the balancing out of the workload you put in and the rest and the recovery which you get out. And that balance makes you feel fit and makes you also give the best results out of what you're doing in the daytime. So that's also the sustainable mix of factors which you can influence to have a great feeling in the sensation in the daytime. And be sustainable. So have a high level of a good performance. But of course you're asking me, let's see what we can do. Right? So what's behind the movement? So okay, I challenge you now to stand up, and I'm going to join you guys too with this, okay? So stand up. If you're sitting, stand up and join me, okay, on this one, because we're going to do a little exercise. So I want you to put your hands up, and then and also here in the hall, maybe you can join me too. So just stand up. Yes, exactly that. Stand up, and then what we're going to do is you put your hands up, and then you just do like this one, okay? And we're going to do 10 times, okay? So it's going 10, yeah, 9. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, great, 3, you're doing 1, 2, 1, and the bonus, 0. Great. Okay, good. So, if you've joined me, right, what are you feeling at the moment? Maybe you're feeling the heartbeat, which is increased a little bit, or even the legs. I did my training yesterday, and I still feel the muscle pain in my legs. So it went a bit too hard yesterday, but I still can feel it. Or also maybe you were laughing. Maybe you felt some shivers in your body because you started moving. And maybe you were a little bit sad. Or maybe you were thinking, what is the guy doing? Is he crazy or what? And you didn't even join in. So there's energy which you feel, right? And it's different levels. Maybe you were focused even, right? On how to do that squat, which I was probably doing wrong. And you know, I had all the tips which I could make it better for it. But you feel energy in different levels. It's like a pyramid. So you feel physical energy, which is the basis on which, well, we live. Then there's the emotional energy, which makes you feel happy or sad. Then there's the mental energy, which makes you feel focused or maybe distracted. And then there's the energy which gives you the connection to what we are actually doing. If you feel that you need to move your why, right? Your spiritual energy, maybe you could so call it. It touches the spirit of why you do stuff and why you do things. And this is most important, of course, because why would you start moving? Right? Why would you take your bike to the train? I came here this morning and it was cold, and I thought, let me take the car. And then I thought, no, I'm going to take my bike. Especially as a bicycle mayor of the region, I like to promote cycling, and I also like to ride my bike myself, of course. And so this morning I put on some extra gloves and I took my bike and I came here riding. But there's always a why. Why do you ask things? So small goals, right? And if you look back, maybe, at a goal which you realized the past, say, year. Maybe it's not that easy because we had Corona the last couple of months, but go back to that moment and take the time to realize. Maybe it was a presentation which you gave, or finishing off a project with your team, or a sports competition which you targeted and it went well, or maybe something which is in the future, which you're already working on and you finished the first little bit. This brings me back to the moment in 2016 when I finished off my cycling career. And I had targeted the Giro d'Italia, which started in the Netherlands, actually here in Arnhem, Nijmegen and Apeldoorn. And there was one thing which I wanted to do in the last season of my life. As a cyclist, of course. Life doesn't end after cycling. I tell you, I'm still here. And I focused on being on the podium in my town, Arnhem. And I needed to do one thing. To qualify, of course, for the Giro d'Italia, to be able to do that, to do it. And then there was the Postbank. I already told you I really love cycling in the area. There's some nice hills here. Of course, if you live in Austria or Switzerland, our hill is 80 meters up. Okay, it's not that much, but and the steepest part is 300 meters. Okay, it's 8%, so it's pretty steep. And I targeted that one. It was only one day in the blue jersey. I was on the podium, yes, but one day in the blue jersey got me on the podium, 10,000 people in front of the podium. And the cool thing was that when I was looking back on the weekend, 500,000 people had seen me do what I did. And when I got back after the Giro d'Italia and watched my Twitter timeline on my phone, I had more than 3.5 million views of what I've done in the Giro d'Italia. So sometimes it's about the little things which you can add up. And we heard Ahmed say, it's about working together. Yes, of course. But it's also about acknowledging what we're already doing. Do you recognize that when you are disposing your garbage at home, that you separate the paper from the plastic, and that you put the vegetable and rests in another box, then and another garbage can, then maybe the cheese or the other garbage which you want to dispose. Acknowledge the little things which you're already doing, and give yourself a pat on the back to say, okay, I'm on the way. I'm on the right track. Because not always does it go the way you want, right? This is also Australia, actually, Tour Down Under. I got distracted from what I really wanted. So this is a product of taking the low-hanging fruit, as in like, okay, maybe I can win this race, which is maybe not suitable for me. So it's also about doing what feels right for you, or for me actually, in this case. I'm not a sprinter. I'm a guy who can ride very fast, and I maybe can win a sprint from a little group. So I had to target races like the World Port Classic, which I won in 2013. As in, I attacked with 25K to go from a small group, and then I could win the race. The Tour of Belgium, which I won in 2006, which was also more or less the same. I attacked from a small group, and they never saw me back. That's what you do. This was Tour Down Under. I thought it would be the chance for me in a big race to be able to realize my goal. As in, sprint for the victory. Well, if you are in a field with B sprinters and I am a C sprinter, then this is the result. It was 2016. Actually, this was 2015, and you know that there was an Olympics in the 2016. So I sent this picture to the Dutch Gymnastics Federation to ask if I could still opt for a spot for the Olympics. Well, what do you think? No. I got comments, you have to work on the landing. Oh well. It is a good moment to sit back and see what happened there. Do you take the time when things don't go right or you crash to reflect on what's happening at the moment? To see that that's an opportunity to change your perspective on what you're doing. And maybe, and that's also a challenge for you, you're all decision makers or you're making a new guidelines for our future as a person, as people. And always looking for the opportunity to make change happen. Crashes, or maybe the last couple of months with Corona, can be the opportunity to change our patterns for the future. We just heard that in Gothenburg there's a big change happening, and I challenge you to use the moment which is there. Disruption always leads to a new reality in the future. As a mental coach, this is one of the things which I really like using to help my clients into a new reality. I use disruption. And sometimes it's a crash, sometimes it's an illness, and sometimes it's the moment that you really realize, I want to change my life, and that's also a little bit of disruption which you can implement in your life and change what you really, and achieve what you really want, okay? Because besides the body, I also realized that it's a moment to there's also the planet which you have to take care of, and it also lasts from your birth to your death. This picture is really a nice one because it tells me that when you reflect on things which go right, you can get the energy for the future to go further. This is me reflecting on the Paris-Roubaix 2011 when I was on the podium, realizing the biggest dream which I had ever had. One of the massive, biggest classics, the hardest race in the world for me, and I think I agree, all cyclists will agree with me on that one, is that when you're on the podium, for me it was a dream. I did 11 times, I participated in this race, and it only managed to realize it only one time. So it's also about, okay, you achieve things, and then sit back and enjoy. Think back on those moments and realize that it gives you a lot of energy. It gives me the energy and the power to realize that I am successful. Even if it was only a third place or just a little postbank. Why do we all aim for the Alpe d'Huez when we have the postbank? We only have the postbank to deal with. And I realize that 20 times postbank is one Alpe d'Huez. So you're already on the right track, I guess. Movement, right? So if you're, the basics of the pyramid on which our energy is based is the physical energy. And it's so important for us that even the Dutch government has guidelines for our movement. I do my best to move enough, but of course, that's only part of the thing. It's also about realizing why would you do what you're doing. And I'm happy to say that more and more people are realizing that it's important to build sustainable programs, to build sustainable mobility, and to build also sustainability in companies. As a trainer, which I'm doing at the moment, which I also do at the moment, so I'm coaching people and I'm training people on personal development, and I use metaphors from cycling, from sports, to help people in companies also regain their vitality, to regain what they really truly believe that it's good. And that's also sometimes part of realizing what you want with your team and at a big company, and feel good in the team. So if, like Ahmed said, if you want to work together, it's also about knowing what you can do together to feel good and fit in the company. So if you're working on a project and you're a good writer, you write the parts. If you're a good presenter, you present the parts. Which reminds me of the moment that I was in my education. I did university management and engineering, and I was always in groups with working on projects. And I was not such a good writer. I didn't like to dive into the subject, as in do a lot of study. So I always told them, okay, you guys write the proposal and the project finish, and I will stand in front of the group and talk about it, which I'm still doing at the moment. So movement matters that much that the government made a guideline, a norm. So 30 minutes per day. And this is interesting because like what we do, separating our garbage, you already do enough, right? Or not enough, maybe sometimes, especially now with Corona, I hear people that it's really, really a big thing that you walk outside your house to the car. Normally, you take your car to your work, and then you walk from the parking to your office. Of course, is that enough? Of course not. But it's interesting because when I'm in front of groups, there are people that they say they think they're not healthy, they're not doing their best. But when they take a watch, for example, and they count their steps, it's interesting to see that 10,000 steps, if you want to realize this, and you walk 2 or 3 times a day, half an hour, that you're already on the right track. And that there are people who don't realize that when you walk your dog, you go shopping by bike, because that's of course interesting. When I ride my bike to the shop around the corner, I sometimes meet my neighbors, for example, and they park their car. And I park my bike, and also sometimes it's of course the opposite when I have to do a lot of shopping. But I like to challenge myself in those situations. Whereas for example, the power training, right? You can do some power training when you just get the shopping bags and leave the cart standing. Something, just little things that add up to me feeling great at the end of the day and having a good energized body. So that's the part of it. Okay, and so. As a bicycle mayor, I like to help people ride. I like to support that, and I like to see what we can do in the area, in the region, especially kids, but also people who use their bike to ride to work. I just opened the other day, I was with the opening of one of the fast cycle tracks from Nijmegen to Kuik, which crosses 3 regions, which is really interesting. They were working on that for, I think, 10 years, and they had just built a bridge. And it was so busy. It's so nice to see that everybody finds these speed cycle paths in the area to use to get to work, to use to move, to use to feel great when you're on your job, and that you feel energized when you do this. Besides being the bicycle mayor of the region, I'm also involved in the Cycling for Climate initiative, which helps entrepreneurs, but initiatives also in Holland by giving attention to what is happening. We can stand still at what's not happening, but that's why I like to be here also as a keynote speaker at POLIS, because there's so much happening, and we need to give more attention to the little things which are already adding up to maybe diminishing if you have the temperature of the plate, when you hit the drops on it, it starts evaporating. But we can diminish maybe the temperature of the plate, so that when the drops hit it, something starts happening. That's why I am the ambassador for the Cycling for Climate initiative. On the 12/12, when it's 5 years after the Paris Accord, we are going to ride to the Paris Boulevard in Utrecht, and that's when we drink a cup of coffee and do our thing for the climate. Okay, if you're looking for some more movement, then feel free to contact me, and I wish you a very nice conference from now on, and I would say that's all for me. Over to Karen.
Thank you, Maarten, for your very inspiring words. I almost ran out and jumped on my bike, but then I remembered I still have some work to do around here. What you said, disruption always leads to a new reality. That will be at the heart of our discussions in the next 4 days. Now let's dive a bit deeper into the theme of this opening plenary session, winning hearts and minds, accelerating sustainable change. The question is, how can we influence mobility behavior, and what are the underlying mechanisms of behavioral change? Is COVID-19 a life-changing moment that offers an opportunity for adapting deeply rooted mobility habits and moving onto a fast track towards sustainable change? And what are the underlying mechanisms, socio-economic aspects that determine the acceptance of new mobility measures by citizens? Or maybe it just comes down to political will and courage. These are a number of questions that we want to explore with a panel of distinguished experts. And it is my pleasure, therefore, to welcome Daniel Helldén, the Vice Mayor for Transport of the City of Stockholm, Giulio Mattioli, Research Fellow at the Department of Transport Planning at Dortmund Technical University, Lucy Saunders, Director of Healthy Streets, and Mirjam van Coillie, Director of Marketing and Innovation from the Dutch bike manufacturer Gazelle. Welcome, my dear panelists. So, before we start our discussion and I pick your excellent brains, let's also launch a poll question to our audience. And I'm turning to my colleague Francesco. I hope he can activate that question, which is, do you think, dear audience, that COVID-19 will ultimately have a lasting positive impact on urban mobility, or rather a negative one? So let's see what you think about this question. And in the meantime, let me turn to my panel and ask them whether they think this is a life-changing moment that indeed is offering us opportunities to change deeply rooted habitual behavior, which our mobility habits are as well, because that's what behavioral experts always tell us. You know, that's at life-changing moments when you need to attack, basically, and try to change behavior. Lucy, what are your views on this?
So I agree that this is a life-changing moment, but it's not just down to what individuals want to do in terms of whether their behaviour will change. So we know that people's behaviour changes not just because they personally want to change, but they need two other important factors. And those two other important factors are where we come in. One of them is the rewards and the penalties for taking different behavioural choices. So in transport, that would be the pleasure of a nice bicycle ride or the cost of a parking ticket. And the other thing is, what is the environment like? Does the environment support us in making a behaviour change? So do we have congested, traffic clogged streets, or do we have lovely, pleasant streets for walking and cycling? So if we want to see this COVID moment change the way that people travel, we need to be really working on, in each of our cities, what are the penalties and rewards that we're offering for different behaviours, and what kind of environment are we providing that might make it more or less rewarding to take different travel choices.
Carrots and sticks, indeed, very important. Let me turn to Daniel as a Vice Mayor in charge of transport in Stockholm. How are you looking at COVID-19? Do you think we'll be able to change people's behavior for the better, or not?
Yes, of course, to the better. I would say, especially after the second wave, because we know it's difficult to change people's behavior, and we can change laws, make something extremely expensive. And if not, we can try to nudge people into certain directions, as we heard before. And nudging works when a person already are heading somewhere, I would say, but don't really know exactly how to find the way. So with an external crisis, nudging can be the thing that changes the direction. And we need to, well, let's say, put ourselves out of the boxes, as Maarten said, and force us to go in a certain direction in real life that do something different. So, for example, bicycling to work, attend a conference like this through a computer instead of flying. So I would say with the first wave, it was something exotic. And with the second wave of COVID, we return to something that are familiar to us and that we can internalize and as a habit or non-reflective alternative. So of course, this is a chance we have.
Mm-hmm. Mirjam, did you see the bike boom that everybody's talking about reflected in your sales?
Yes, luckily we did. And I think, this crisis has made us see that there are alternatives to travel to work, especially when I think at least 50% of all the commute we do is within a range of 15 kilometers, which you can easily do with at least an electric bike. As where the Netherlands are known for the flat lands, I think now electrification has shown us that the bike has much more possibilities to grow over the world. So yes, we try now also to motivate countries around the Netherlands to cycle more.
Yeah, it's true that the e-bike is really extending the potential of cycling beyond the typical 5 kilometer range tremendously. And if it goes together or hand in hand with perfect super cycle highways, as we see in the Netherlands and in Arnhem-Nijmegen, then of course we have the ideal setting, I would say. But if we want people to get out of their cars, and I'm turning to you, Giulio, now, we also need to understand why they are so attached to their cars. And you have been researching car dependence and carbon lock-in in the transport sector, but you've also been looking at the implications of car dependence for social inequality and transport disadvantage. What did you discover in your work?
Right, yeah, thank you. So broadly, when we talk about car dependence, we talk about like all the different reasons why it's in plain language, all the different reasons why it's so difficult to reduce car use, even though we know that we ought to. So it is true that some of these reasons have to do with sort of the psychological level, like psychological attachment that some people have to cars, maybe some like the private space that comes with the car and so on, something which is very important during a pandemic. There are also some activities which are easier to carry out with cars, such as those where people have to carry cargo, objects, stuff, pets, children, and things like that, which often explains why people use them even over short distances. But beyond that, I think there is a danger of focusing too much on individuals and their choices, and as Lucy was saying, to ignoring like the more structural factors. So individual choices matter, but there are important structural factors that frame them. These have to do, for example, with the way we have built our cities, the way in which we have let cars dominate the street space, which is a topic which was very prominent during the COVID crisis, and so on. The way we have invested little in alternative modes, and so on, etc. So overall, these factors mean that in many contexts, it is pretty hard for people to use alternatives. There was a recent study, for example, published in Nature, which looked at different cities all over the world, including Amsterdam and Stockholm, finding that actually public transport is competitive with the car only in the very small city center, even of those cities. So in most of the rest of the metropolitan area, it takes roughly twice the time to travel by public transport than it takes by car. So car dependence is something which is pretty, hard fact. And one result of this situation is some households are sort of forced into car ownership, in that they do own cars even though they can hardly afford them. And in my work, I've estimated that this accounts for like 58% of households in UK, Germany, and France. So these are households who own cars despite being in absolute poverty. So they will have to trade off, like spending on fuel with spending against other things. And this is what explains then perhaps movements such as the yellow vest, which I have seen last year.
Interesting insights indeed. So there's a lot we can do as well. We just shouldn't leave it to the individual, that's clear. So let me turn to Daniel to bring in the city perspective here. One of the things, and also coming back to what Lucy said earlier about carrots and sticks, you know, one of the things that is quoted as being a powerful tool and a potential solution also for tackling a number of issues when it comes to urban mobility are pricing measures. And they're legendary at the same time for being very unpopular with people. And I've always been fascinated by how you handled the congestion charge in Stockholm. You managed really to get buy-in from the citizens, while many other cities had also launched referendums. And that was kind of a recipe for disaster, you know, ask people if they want pricing. Hell no, of course they don't want to have pricing, but you managed to turn it around. What is your secret? Can you tell us a bit more about how you managed to get buy-in from the citizens and managed to also get political support for that?
Yes, of course. First of all, I would say that it has been a marvelous success, the congestion charge. We don't have nearly any opposition against the congestion charges system. And still we have raised the taxes twice and doubled the tax per hour in peak hour. And the reduction of cars going into the city has been stable since 16 years. So it's really working. And the success lies on two aspects. First, making it possible to see the effects before the decision, and then spread the money so that all gain from it.
If I could maybe ask the other panelists to mute themselves because there's some background.
Yes, I wait. Okay. It all began with an election and a settlement between the Social Democratic Party and the Green Party on the national level. And the congestion charges was to be implemented within the terms of office. And the question was, how could we do this without making people furious? Because, as you say, people don't like taxes. So we chose to go for a test, a full-scale test, which we called the Stockholm test. And after the test, a referendum together with the next election. And the money was destined for roads and public transportation. And this was a part of the referendum. So money should go to make it better for those who paid when driving and paid by leaving their car. So everybody should get something. So for 7 months, we ran a full-scale test with a lot of extra buses for those who didn't want to pay the taxes or couldn't afford it. Everything worked very well. The traffic disappeared. The city went to be a better place. And those in opposition were furious about, those who were furious couldn't do more than direct their anger to the coming referendum. So when the test period was over and the system disappeared before the referendum, the traffic came back and the people could see what they had gained from the congestion charges and what they could lose. It all was very clear for the inhabitants. So the referendum ended with 51.5% yes, and the 75% of the people voted in the election, and this made it a legitimate decision. So this was to start with a full-scale test, show which effect it would gain, and then have a referendum was I would say the main thing that made it a success. But then we have the other part of it, because it could have ended here, though the opposition won the election, both on the national level and the city level. So the decision were to be made in the parliament. So the question was, would they should shut it down because the referendum was just was not decisionable. The Stockholmers loved it, and the government decided that the money should go to a big highway outside of Stockholm. And this made the effect that the opposition, who didn't like the congestion charges, they started to like it because they could get this highway, and the money was locked in for about 50 years. So if you remove the congestion charges, you won't get that highway. So this is another part of the effect. The opposition started to like it because they got something in the same time as those who wanted the congestion charges got rid of the cars in the city center. So I would say it's not I'm not in favor of the highway, but today we have, when we raised the taxation twice, all the money goes to the raise goes to a metro system. So now everybody is happy. Nobody wants to remove the taxation.
Everybody's happy. Great. So a win-win for everybody involved. That sounds like a dream. And what I think is also instrumental when I listen to your story is the fact that people could try out the measure and could see the impact in real life of introducing the measure, and on that basis also decide in favor of it. And I think that is also what COVID-19 has been offering us, you know, a huge sandbox that we can play in, because we're respacing our streets, we're introducing temporary measures, but I think the fact that people experience their benefit can also help to make them permanent over time. At least that's what I hope. But of course, what is always a bit difficult is that we're talking about the greater good. You know, you do it because it's good for the environment and blah, blah, blah. But of course, people ultimately care mostly about themselves, to be honest. And I'm wondering, and I'm turning to Lucy now, whether the health argument, you know, the personal well-being, could be a more powerful argument rather than the greater good to finally get people on those healthy modes, you know, like cycling and walking.
Well, certainly there are some people who will respond to messaging around personal health and they'll feel very positive about it. But there are a lot of people who don't like to feel like they're being told that they need to do something which to them might feel effortful and unrewarding and unpleasant, and often which they think might be dangerous. So we have to be really careful in the way that we frame our message to the public so that they feel positive about what we're proposing to do. And there's two really key elements to it. One of them is choice and the other is control. So people tend to respond negatively when they feel they don't have a choice, that they're being told they have to do something, and when they feel they have no control over what is happening to them. And this is where the Healthy Streets framing is not actually around personal health and well-being, but around a healthy environment. So what Healthy Streets says is we are seeking to deliver to you a healthy environment, and you can then choose what you do with it. So you can choose not to engage with it at all, or you can choose to live a healthier life in it, but that's your choice. The focus is on giving rather than taking. We will give you an environment and you choose what to do with it, rather than, I think some people feel when walking and cycling are being promoted to them, that they're having the luxury and pleasure of driving being taken away, and they are being forced to do something that they don't want to do. So the language and framing which is successful in getting public support has to be very carefully orchestrated around that situation of control and choice. But what I do think people respond well to, and it's something we need to get better at doing, is talking about really tangible short-term personal benefits that aren't necessarily to do with physical health or long-term health benefits. And we've seen this a little bit during the COVID measures that have been coming in. People report that they can sleep better at night because it's less noisy when there's less traffic. that they can see birds out in their neighborhood, that the children can play in the street. So these tangible, real short-term benefits tend to be much easier for people to connect with, and they are the result of delivering these healthy street environments rather than focusing on long-term physical health benefits.
So it's all a matter also about nudging and making sure that they still feel they can make the choice themselves. I understand. Talking about nudging, you know, another way to influence behavior, of course, is also through marketing strategies. And Mirjam, I'm turning to you because we know that the car industry in particular has been very successful in marketing its product in all kinds of ways. And I'm wondering whether the bicycle industry has learned from that, and if you also have a way of marketing the bicycle, which would not only be good for you in this particular case, but also good for our cities.
Yeah, and therefore I think we should not look too much to the car industry. The car is always looked at as a status symbol, like a holy cow. And they were very much, and also the commercials, design and feature driven. And that's, I think, what now a lot of bicycle brands so far also have been doing, very much focusing on the features. Whereas the bicycle has a different role in society, especially also in the Netherlands. When you look at our royal family or our prime minister, they want to show that they are as normal as possible, normal people. And therefore, I think it's a contrast where the car is a status symbol, the bicycle is more to show that all people are equal. And therefore, I think, and what you recently see with electric cars coming up, and I think there the brands are doing a better job, is focusing on the driving experience. Because of the silence of the car, now suddenly you realize that you should look outside and that you should enjoy nature and enjoy the silence. And therefore, I think for bicycles, we should much more focus on the cycling experience, that it provides you with freedom and fun and fitness, and that cycling is all about the better choice for people and planet. And I think there, when you look at the industry and what we can do as a market leader together with other brands, we should focus on how to motivate people to cycle more. And I think there should we focus on the next decade. And that then, of course, with your brand, you could look and focus more on making the journey more comfortable and fun and a safe ride. So it's a bit a double maybe on your question, but I think we have another job in because also the role of the bicycle is so different than that of the car.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree more that the role is very different. Just to say that the other panelists are always welcome also to respond to what their colleagues are saying. If you feel you would like to say something or would like to contribute to another statement, just wave and I'll make sure to give you the floor. In the meantime, I would like to come back to Giulio, because if there's something that is being talked about a lot these days, it is MaaS, mobility as a service. And very often also it's kind of positioned as the holy grail that suddenly will, you know, make people change in a sustainable way or change their behavior in favor of sustainable mobility, just as if giving them an app will just do the trick. As you can maybe notice from the way I phrase it, I have my doubts that MaaS could pull this off. But do you think that a high level of multimodality in general naturally will lead to less car use, or is it too simple?
Yeah, I agree. It's probably too simple in that I think there's a misunderstanding around multimodality, which is we tend to think about multimodality. When we talk about it, we tend to assume more or less consciously that there will be a sort of one-to-one substitution, that we have people who are using the car for all of their trips, and perhaps we cannot convince them to give up the car entirely, but we can just convince them to substitute the car with other modes for a few of those trips, or to combine the car with other modes for some of those trips. And so there will be a substitution which is beneficial for the environment. But this is not necessarily how things work. So people adapt their travel behavior to the travel options that they have. And if we offer them more options, and if we make it easier for them to use a certain mode, then they might just start to use that more without using other modes less. Or they might substitute in ways which we did not expect, such as there was a recent study in Paris finding that e-scooters are actually bad for the environment, because people have basically substituted walking and cycling, which is zero emissions, with e-scooters, which are, close, but not zero emissions. So it is more complex than how we tend to assume. And in our research, we have found that multimodal individuals tend to have roughly the same CO2 emissions than unimodal individuals. And that's because they tend to travel over longer distances. And in the case of trips, we have looked at multimodal trips where several modes are combined, and they tend to have higher CO2 emissions than unimodal trips because typically they're over longer distances. So I might take my car to take the train, but that means I'm going pretty far away, and that corresponds to more emissions than if I had just taken the car for 1 kilometer. So to me, this suggests that the reason for this paradox is multimodality tends to be associated with longer distances. And this suggests that multimodality can only ever be part of the solution, right? So we talked about before about carrots and sticks. If we think we're going to, achieve sustainable mobility just through multimodality, just by making other modes more attractive, I think we're probably deluding ourselves to some extent. But that doesn't mean it's useless. If we combine these apps and an emphasis on multimodality and improving other modes with an emphasis on trying to reduce distances by car directly with things like pricing and so on, so carrots and sticks, then perhaps it can be a part of this package and recipe. But I do see too much emphasis on silver bullets, as in, we'll just have to implement this app and everything will be fine. And most of all, I think what people read into that is we'll just have to implement this app and we will not have to do all those other uncomfortable things which we don't really fancy doing.
Yeah, very interesting insights indeed, and I fully agree that it's just not as simple as that. And also, actually, multimodality or being multimodal is a bit of a burden as well. It asks an effort also from the traveler to combine these different modes, and that's why digital integration certainly is not enough. But we also need physical integration. We need these modes to come together in our urban space as well, at stations, through mobility hubs, etc. So that brings me to space, urban space, which is scarce and therefore very, very valuable, but also potentially a very powerful tool for public authorities because they are in charge of that urban space. So I'm wondering, Lucy, whether the way we plan our space and the way we shape our urban fabric could also steer people towards more sustainable mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's a bit special about London is that when they adopted the Healthy Streets approach, they really tied together land use planning and transport planning, which is so obvious, and yet it's not being done in most cities. But these two things are absolutely integrated in terms of their impacts, and yet we don't plan those things together. And one of the barriers to this issue, and it comes back to what Tony was talking about at the beginning, is collaboration. And the reason why Healthy Streets was successful in delivering collaboration, not just between land use planning and transport planning, but all the sectors who have an influence on our urban spaces, so culture, policing, environment, public health, is that there is one shared common plain language. And one of the big barriers we have to the collaboration between sectors that we need to ensure that our urban spaces are supporting sustainable travel is that each professional group has their own special language that they talk amongst themselves. And it makes it so much more difficult for finding those points where people can come together. So a shared common language is really central. Another thing that is very important is a real focus on the human experience of being on streets. The best streets in European cities are the ones that have been designed very much focused around what do human beings feel like in this space. Many of them hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and there's a strong correlation with streets that were built before the car existed, we are now spending huge amounts of money trying to undo the mistakes that we made in the second half of the 20th century when we focused on moving cars through cities, but really bringing ourselves back to what does it feel like to be on a street. That should be our guiding principle in the decisions that we make around building our urban spaces.
Yes, so a very powerful tool indeed. And let me turn to Daniel, because we've heard about parts of the solution that could help steer people towards sustainable mobility. And I'm wondering, knowing that these are the measures that can be taken, that should be taken, including less popular measures indeed, like pricing, how instrumental is political leadership, is political courage and will in transforming transportation for the better? Because there's always this balance that you have to strike between what the individual citizen wants and what society as a whole needs, and those are not necessarily aligned. So can a push for a major transport transformation through certain measures also get you re-elected, Daniel?
Of course. First, I would say you can't be a successful political leader if you don't know where you're heading. And when you know where you are heading, it becomes instrumental. It needs to be instrumental. But what makes it different from instrumental administration or experts is that as a politician, you must feel what the people, the voters, can agree on. That's crucial. And from that point, you bend your ideas. They are can never be carved into stone. And if you think so, you will never succeed in your what you are doing. And from here, you need to be instrumental. Political life is to run in a steady direction, I would say, towards a political goal, using creativity, patience, and compromise. And it's a lot of compromising. So it's instrumental, but it's compromising all the time. And of course, mayor transport transformation can get re-elected, but it all comes to timing and opportunity. It's not always there. But as a successful politician, you know when the opportunity stands in front of you. It's a central part of the profession to know, I would say.
So you create a personal relationship also with your citizens as a politician. I'm wondering if Mirjam, if you are trying to do the same with your customer, do you try to establish a personal relationship with them in the way that you also promote your product, your bicycle?
Well, for many years, our retail organizations, our partners had a relationship with the end consumer. And we now started, of course, to because of more digitization, to get in contact with the end consumer. And by making the bicycle with the IoT part of the internet, of course, we want to provide a better riding experience. So yes, we do see, because of the data provided, we learn much more how bicycles are used and how we then get the service up to a level that we can provide them with better routes, faster routes, safer routes, for instance, for the driving and riding experience. But on the other hand, also provide them with, for example, a very important feature is the anti-theft and GPS location of electric bikes, because it's quite an investment to spend €2,500 on an electric bike. And of course, the theft is still an enormous problem. So there also we can help the consumer in providing them with more safety and get the bikes back in place.
That sounds interesting. And I see that we've also some questions coming in from our audience. So I'm going to have a look at those questions and ask them to our panelists. There is a first comment from Klaas Jan from Nijmegen. And he says that there is a risk that a part of the travelers will choose an alternative like cycling, working more from home, or traveling outside of the peak hours, but that another part will see the benefits of less congestion and then will start using the car more because of that. How can we prevent this from happening? Who would like to say something about that from our panel? not all at the same time. Giulio, maybe what do you think?
Well, it's a good question, first of all. So I don't think I have a definite answer, but I think perhaps the initiatives that have happened that deal with taking some space away from the car could go in that direction. So if there are less cars using the street, then why not taking some of that space away? Since like the crisis has made us realize that they were using too much space anyway. And it's pretty hard to justify the amount of space that is given to given for free to parked cars in cities. So there are many good reasons to take some of that space, and I think if you that might perhaps counteract that effect of reducing congestion, and yeah, so it might be like killing two birds with one stone.
Lucy, do you have any views to share on this particular question?
I would agree with what Giulio said, and I think we could also use some of the other levers that we have available to us in terms of we have laws around how fast you can drive and where you're allowed to park and load vehicles. We don't generally enforce them as strictly as we could do, and so we could look to use those levers that we have already in place and applying them a little bit more stringently than we have done in the past. I think that would also contribute.
Any other panelists who would like to respond, Giulio?
So very quickly, what Lucy said, let me come to mind that there's a lot of talk about automation, what it could do perhaps in 20 years, you know, if we ever get to level 5 automation. But there's one thing we know we could do already, which is sort of like put automatic speed limiters. Or use that sort of technology to make sure that it's actually, you can't, you know, drive at 100 kilometers per hour in cities, even if you want to. And I find it pretty striking that for some reasons we're not doing that, even though we could.
That's an important point indeed. And POLIS, with its members, has been lobbying heavily to get that intelligent speed assistance implemented once and for all in our cars, and indeed ensure that compliance. So that's an important topic. Now, we have been talking about the cycling boom. We have been talking about the opportunities offered by the current crisis. But what we haven't mentioned yet, and that's also a question from one of our participants, is will we succeed in making public transport bounce back? Because this is a mode that is currently suffering a lot in terms of people being afraid of using it, in terms of reduced capacity due to physical distancing requirements, etc. How can we make sure that public transport comes back from this crisis? Daniel, what's your feeling in Stockholm?
Well, in the middle of the crisis, it's hard to know. Well, I think people will go back to public transportation. What we will see, I think, is that the biggest effect will be that people will work a lot more from home, and we won't get as crowded public transportations that we did before. We have some problems today in Stockholm that people go by public transportation, even though they shouldn't, because it sometimes makes it too crowded. So I don't think the problem is the public transportation. People will go back to that. And I think people will leave the car because this change has made a huge change when it comes to driving and working, and those with money and high salaries are those who mostly work from home today, and that I think will have a great effect on car using.
Indeed, there is also a very large group of people who don't have alternatives to turn to and will always depend on public transport. So I also agree that it should bounce back and that we basically have no choice. Also, yes, for equity and affordability purposes, there is no other mode that can deliver what mass transit can deliver to our cities. I see there's a question specifically addressed to you, Lucy. It says, when arriving at a giving and not a taking concept, did you brainstorm and develop a list of options first and then select the best one?
Is the best one in terms of what could be given? So generally, people feel that they have a right to live in an environment which is safe, where the air is clean, where the noise levels are not so dangerous that they harm the development of their children and their health. These are things that we should expect as givens, just like we expect when we turn on a tap that the water that we drink is safe to drink. And so the Healthy Streets framing is trying to remind people that these things that we have eroded over 70, 80 years of car dominance have ended up with us being in an environment where we don't take it as a given that the air that we breathe is clean and that it's quiet enough for us to sleep well at night and that we can safely travel actively and that our children can play outdoors. So Healthy Streets is trying to remind us all that we have basic needs as human beings that we're not meeting with our reliance on car use. And if we look at our street environments, how can we change them to make them serve our basic human needs? I talk about streets being fit for human consumption. And at the moment, most streets in Europe are not fit for human consumption in one way or another. And I think trying to get people to really focus on those basic things that they should be demanding and how do we deliver them is quite an effective way of opening that conversation up around giving rather than taking.
Thank you, Lucy. I have a question now. I would turn to Mirjam for that. So there's Giles who's saying that he's happy to see a cycle manufacturer on the panel. And he is asking whether we need to consider a wider range of types and form factors to bicycles to make this more appealing to more people beyond the e-bikes. So in the Netherlands, but also of course beyond where not everybody owns 3 bicycles just yet. How should we position the bicycle in a better way, whether it's through policy or through manufacturers, to make it even more appealing? Which arguments can we further bring to the table?
Well, I think there already has been a shift, at least in the Netherlands, what we've seen. So what I was talking about, that at first every bike in the Netherlands was black because you wanted to blend in. And now you see that the bike is getting, like a car, a bit more of a status symbol, but more in a positive context. So I do think that a lot of brands, at least we are addressing the bicycle more as a lifestyle product, and therefore accommodate different styles, colors, designs, and we have a huge range to offer. So I do think that it's shifted already towards more that you can show your bike and show who you are by buying a certain design. So I hope that he's confident. At least we're working on it every day.
Sounds good. Now,
yeah.
Talking about being locked into a car culture, Giulio, let me turn to you for the question I have here from a colleague of mine. One of the major problems we face here in Belgium, where we are based, is that this company car culture. You know, people have a company car, they don't have to pay for the fuel either. So of course, it's very difficult to get them away from that incentive. Is this something you see also in other countries, or is this just inherent to us Belgians here?
I do think it exists in many countries, but from what I've heard from Belgian colleagues, it is particularly pronounced in Belgium. I'm not sure I can say more than that, but definitely I think a lot of like these sustainable transport transitions is not necessarily about making other alternatives, subsidizing, incentivizing, making other alternatives look more appealing, but it's also about like stopping to subsidizing, incentivizing, and, you know, creating all kinds of incentives for car use. And that is the situation at present. So in Belgium, it would be things like company cars, perhaps more than anything. But in Germany, from where I'm based, there are equivalent things such as, tax rebates for people who commute by car over very long distances, which tend to be pretty regressive as well, because these people tend to be the higher income and so on. So if we start taking away those, I know it's difficult, but that should definitely be part of what we're doing.
It all comes down to internalizing external costs of car use, indeed, and making the polluter pay as well, whether it's pollution in terms of air or in terms of space. And this is still not sufficiently done. We are slowly approaching the end of our session. So I would like to conclude this panel debate with a closing question to all of you. What would be your number one measure that you think is instrumental to bring about this major behavioral shift that we need in favor of sustainable urban mobility. Let's start with you, Daniel.
Yes, I think urban mobility needs to be affordable, accessible, and simple, and simple, and simple, and simple. Because people need to have this nudging in a way that makes it easy for them to change. And it comes to everybody. Doesn't differ what socio-economic background you have or anything. But of course, you need to have equal opportunities to go to work, to school, and leisure activities. And we have to make it easy for our citizens, companies, and key stakeholders to make the right choices in everyday life. And that, again, it needs to be simple, I would say.
Affordable, accessible, and simple. I think that would be a nice slogan indeed that we need to keep in mind all the time when we talk about sustainable urban mobility. Giulio, what's your choice?
Hi, yeah, I don't have a single measure, but I have like a single message. And I don't mean no criticism of my fellow panelists with that, but I think there's often in this debate on sustainable transport too much emphasis on single measures, silver bullets, what is the one thing we should do so that we can avoid doing the others. And I think most of the time this is like misleading. Most of the time we need sustainable transport is such a tough nut to crack. It's the only sector in the EU where emissions are increasing rather than decreasing. And so really, if we want to solve it, we need sort of to throw the kitchen sink at it. We need to have comprehensive packages, which include lots of measures. So when we identify a measure, we should not think, oh, that allows me not to do that other thing, but we should rather think, how can we integrate it and make it in a sensible package, and perhaps in a sensible sequence of measures, one after the other, that allows us to get there eventually.
No silver bullets indeed. And I think this integration, this package of measures, ticking several boxes in one go, ideally, is also what our sustainable urban mobility plan approach that Europe is promoting is putting forward. If I would ask you the question, Mirjam, I guess your answer would have to do with cycling.
Yes, of course. But I would go for tax rebates as a carrot. And the stick to you. So when you're not commuting, for example, by bike, living so close to work, you should been hit with the stick and pay for your wrong choice. So I think I think with taxes we can do a lot, and I think in Belgium and in Germany it's already better organized or higher motivation than in the Netherlands at this moment. But let's see, okay, how can we spread it throughout Europe to have a tax benefit and motivate people more by commuting by bike, indeed.
So did you just say that something was better in Belgium than in the Netherlands?
Yes.
I'm not used to
at that point. Yes, it is. So we still have a rule that when you live close to your work, that you get your fee as a benefit for your car still paid as part of your wage. Whereas in Belgium, you still get payment for going by bike. In the Netherlands, that has been cut. So I think we can do a better job. And I think also we did not have the tax benefit by buying a new e-bike, and that has been in Germany for a while, that you could have the VAT deduction.
Yeah, indeed, because e-bikes are not cheap to buy. So
no.
But also the public sector can play an interesting role there, like the leasing scheme we see, for example, in the Ile-de-France region around Paris, where you can lease a bike as well through the government, which I think are very important initiatives as well. But glad to hear that Belgium is doing something better than the Netherlands.
Yes, at that point, yes, for sure.
Yes, of course, not in general. Lucy,
yes.
What's your number one?
Well, we've already mentioned two things I think are really important. So intelligent speed adaptation and also internalizing the external cost of driving. But maybe I'll leave with a question, which I think we should all ask of our political leaders, but also the leaders in key decision-making roles in all of our transport and planning authorities, which is, do these people walk and cycle in the city that they're in charge of making decisions about? And do they do it every day? Because I think if people aren't connected to the actual experience of being on the streets, they can't make as good decisions about how those streets are managed. You will be surprised if you look at your own city, how few of the people in the most powerful positions have a genuine day-to-day experience of walking and cycling on the streets.
Thank you, Lucy, a beautiful statement to end with. And I would like to thank all our panelists for their great interventions. You've been to the point and brief in your answers exactly the way I had asked you, and I thank you for that. So that brings us to the end of this opening plenary session. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me announce that in half an hour from now, so at 11:30, we will be starting with the first round of parallel sessions. This first round focusing on size doesn't matter. That's focusing on our small and medium-sized cities in the network. There is one on new traffic management tools, a session on healthy urban and transport planning, and a fourth parallel session on zero-emission transport for freight. So a wide menu, as I said, to choose from. I hope you will enjoy this round of parallel sessions as well as the coming rounds in the next couple of days. And I'll see you again at the latest in the closing plenary on the last day of our conference, but we're not there just yet. So enjoy the POLIS conference, and thank you very much for being with us. Bye.